Commander Vex'thul stared at the tactical display with the kind of intense focus that had earned him 17 commendations and a reputation as the Zephyrian Empire's finest hunter. His 6 eyes tracked the pulsing signals emanating from the third planet of this backwater solar system, and his mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "Lieutenant Pip'squeek," he barked, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority that made junior officers wet themselves. "Tell me what you make of these readings." Pip'squeek, who looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with an overly enthusiastic college student, practically vibrated with excitement as he consulted his datapad. "Sir, the patterns are absolutely fascinating. According to Xenobiology Manual 77 Alpha, these rhythmic thumping patterns indicate primitive territorial marking behavior. The frequency suggests large bipedal creatures, approximately 2 meters tall, with significantly dense bone structure." Vex'thul's primary eyes narrowed. "Territorial marking, you say?" "Oh yes, sir. Very aggressive, too. The decibel readings suggest they're trying to intimidate rivals across vast distances. Classic apex predator behavior, but clearly primitive. Look at this pattern here." Pip'squeek's antennae twitched as he highlighted a particularly intense signal burst. "This specimen seems to be broadcasting dominance calls for hours at a time. Probably the pack leader." What neither of these galactic geniuses realized was that they were intercepting Jake Morrison's late-night DJ sessions. Jake, a 28-year-old human with questionable taste in music and an even more questionable understanding of noise ordinances, had just installed a subwoofer system that could probably wake the dead. And apparently it could wake aliens too. Jake was currently in his garage, surrounded by enough audio equipment to power a small concert, but completely oblivious to the fact that his playlist Sick Beats for Sicker Nights Volume 47 was being analyzed by an alien military intelligence unit. He was too busy arguing with his smart home system about whether his music qualified as art or just really expensive noise. "Alexa, play my bass test playlist," Jake commanded, cracking open another energy drink. "I'm sorry. I didn't understand. Did you say face rest playlist?" "Bass. Test. Bass." Jake enunciated each word like he was talking to a particularly dense toddler. "Playing Jazz Fest playlist. I literally hate you sometimes." Meanwhile, 300,000 kilometers away, Vex'thul was studying what he believed to be complex battle formations. These creatures are clearly more sophisticated than we initially thought. Look at these coordinated sound bursts. They're communicating across their entire settlement. Pip'squeek nodded enthusiastically. "The tactical implications are staggering, sir. If they can coordinate pack behavior across such distances, they might actually pose a challenge during the hunt." The hunt. That's what this was all about. The Zephyrian Empire had made first contact with 17 species, and had successfully hunted 16 of them to extinction. They weren't necessarily evil, just really, really good at misunderstanding other cultures. And right now they were misunderstanding Earth so hard it was practically an art form. "Sir," Pip'squeek continued, consulting another manual, "I've cross-referenced the signal patterns with known predator behaviors. These humans definitely fit the profile of a Class 7 hunting species. Large, territorial, and apparently fond of psychological warfare." Vex'thul's mandibles clicked approvingly. "Excellent work, Lieutenant. Begin preparations for planetfall. We'll start with reconnaissance, then move to capture. I want to bring back live specimens." "Should we inform High Command?" "Not yet. Let's see what we're dealing with first. According to your analysis, these humans are primitive. We should be able to handle them ourselves." Back on Earth, Jake had finally gotten his sound system working properly. The bass drop that followed was magnificent, a earth-shaking, soul-stirring masterpiece that rattled windows 3 blocks away and prompted Mrs. Kowalski to call the police. Again. The same bass drop that registered on alien sensors as a weapon discharge. "Sir." Pip'squeek's voice was suddenly much less enthusiastic. That last burst, it registered as a Class 4 sonic weapon. Vex'thul's expression shifted from confident to concerned. "Sonic weapons? Are you certain?" "The energy signature is unmistakable." Sir, I think we may have underestimated these humans. If only they knew they were being outsmarted by a guy who once spent 3 hours trying to microwave a burrito before realizing the microwave wasn't plugged in. The Zephyrian stealth ship touched down in Jake's backyard with all the grace of a falling refrigerator, which, considering Jake's neighbors, wasn't particularly unusual. Mrs. Patterson, 2 houses down, had a teenage son who drove a motorcycle, and Mr. Chen had been renovating his bathroom for the past 6 months. Another loud crash was just Tuesday. Vex'thul emerged from the ship wearing full combat armor that cost more than most planets' GDP, but equipped with sensors that could detect a heartbeat from a mile away and weapons that could level a city block. He took one look at suburbia and immediately knew he was in over his head. "Lieutenant," he whispered into his comm unit, "this is unlike anything in our tactical databases." Pip'squeek, who had somehow managed to get his antennae tangled in what humans call Christmas lights, was having his own crisis. "Sir, these defensive installations are incredibly sophisticated. This web of lights appears to be some kind of detection grid. And sir, I think we've been spotted." The detection grid was actually Jake's leftover Christmas decorations from 2 years ago. He'd been too lazy to take them down, and now they were providing the galaxy's most advanced military unit with their first taste of human ingenuity. Which is to say, human laziness disguised as strategy. "Movement detected," Vex'thul hissed, raising his plasma rifle. 12 o'clock. What he'd detected was Buster, Jake's golden retriever, who had the intellectual capacity of a particularly friendly rock and the tactical awareness of a doorstop. Buster saw the aliens and immediately assumed they were new friends who wanted to play fetch. His tail wagged so hard it could have powered a small generator. It's approaching," Pip'squeek whispered, consulting his field manual. "Should we engage?" "Wait, let me analyze its behavior patterns." Vex'thul watched as Buster sat down and tilted his head in that universally cute way that dogs do when they're confused. "It's displaying submission postures, clearly a subordinate member of the pack." Buster, interpretation aside, was just wondering why these weird-looking humans weren't throwing a ball yet. The real terror began when they encountered Jake's automated sprinkler system. Vex'thul was carefully approaching the house when suddenly, without warning, water began shooting out of the ground in perfectly timed intervals. A species that had never seen irrigation. This looked like a sophisticated hydro-mine defense system. "Defensive countermeasures activated," Vex'thul shouted, diving behind a garden gnome. "They know we're here." Pip'squeek, who had managed to untangle himself from the Christmas lights only to step directly onto a motion sensor light, was now illuminated like a disco ball. "Sir, I think I've triggered their detection grid. We're compromised." The motion sensor light, which Jake had installed because he kept tripping over his own garden hose, was now providing what the aliens interpreted as a target acquisition system. Every time Pip'squeek moved, the light followed him. From the aliens' perspective, this was clearly advanced military technology. From the light's perspective, it was just doing its job. Inside the house, Jake was completely oblivious to the alien invasion happening in his backyard. He was too busy having an argument with his smart home system about playlist management. "Alexa, shuffle my workout playlist." "I'm sorry. I don't understand shuffle my workout playlist." "Did you mean shuffle my workout playlist?" "They're the same thing, you digital disaster." "I found several playlists. Would you like me to play disaster movie soundtracks?" "I'm going to throw you in the garbage disposal." "I'm sorry. I don't understand throw you in the garbage disposal." "Did you mean throw you in the garbage disposal?" This conversation, picked up by alien listening devices, was interpreted as Jake coordinating with his tactical AI about disposal methods for prisoners. The aliens were becoming increasingly convinced that they had stumbled upon a military installation run by a particularly cunning war chief. The final straw came when they encountered Jake's Roomba. The little robotic vacuum had been doing its job, mindlessly bumping into furniture and occasionally getting stuck under the couch. But to the aliens, it looked like an autonomous patrol unit. "Sir," Pip'squeek's voice was barely a whisper, "it's following us." The Roomba, which had detected the aliens' heat signatures, had indeed changed course to investigate. It bumped into Pip'squeek's foot, backed up, and tried again. Then it got stuck against his ankle and started making frustrated beeping noises. "It's trying to communicate," Vex'thul said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "This is definitely a reconnaissance unit. They're studying us." The Roomba, having determined that alien feet were basically just weirdly shaped furniture, gave up and went back to its original patrol route. But not before it had given two of the galaxy's most feared hunters a complete nervous breakdown. By the time the aliens had regrouped behind the garden shed, they were beginning to suspect that humanity might be slightly more formidable than their initial assessment suggested. They had no idea that they'd just been outsmarted by a golden retriever, a sprinkler system, and a vacuum cleaner that once got stuck on a sock for 3 hours. Dawn broke over suburbia like a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, which meant it was time for Jake's morning routine. This routine, which Jake considered as natural as breathing, was about to become the stuff of alien nightmares. Vex'thul and Pip'squeek had spent the night huddled behind the garden shed, analyzing what they believed to be sophisticated defense systems. They'd filed 17 separate reports about automated water cannons, mobile patrol units, and advanced detection grids. What they hadn't counted on was the psychological warfare campaign that was about to begin. Jake's alarm went off at 7 a.m. sharp, which wouldn't have been notable except that Jake's alarm was a foghorn. He'd bought it during his brief phase of thinking foghorns were hilarious, which had lasted exactly until the first time it went off. But Jake was too lazy to change it, and too stubborn to admit he'd made a mistake. The sound that erupted from Jake's bedroom window was like the dying scream of a mechanical whale, amplified through speakers that could wake the dead. To the aliens, it sounded like a war horn summoning the entire human colony to battle. "Battle stations," Vex'thul hissed, raising his plasma rifle. "They're mobilizing." What they were actually witnessing was Jake stumbling out of bed, wearing boxers that had seen better days, and a t-shirt that read, "I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right." Jake's first destination was the coffee machine, because Jake without caffeine was barely functional, even by human standards. The coffee grinder, which Jake had specifically bought because it was industrial grade, sounded like a small aircraft engine having a nervous breakdown. To aliens with sensitive hearing, it was like being trapped inside a blender filled with broken glass. "What kind of machinery are they operating?" Pip'squeek whispered, his antennae flattened against his head. "Unknown," Vex'thul replied, consulting his scanner. "But the energy signatures are off the charts. They're preparing something big." Jake was preparing coffee. Really, really strong coffee, because Tuesday was leg day and leg day required chemical assistance. But the real entertainment began when Jake decided to go for his morning jog. Jake's idea of jogging was less graceful gazelle and more wounded buffalo with determination issues. His running shoes, which had more technological features than most spacecraft, squeaked and thudded against the pavement in a rhythm that could charitably be described as enthusiastic. As Jake pounded down the street, car alarms began going off. This wasn't because Jake was particularly loud, but because every car on the block was approximately 15 years old and had alarm systems that were triggered by everything from passing trucks to aggressive squirrels. To the aliens, this sounded like a coordinated alert system. Every few houses, another alarm would join the chorus, creating what appeared to be a neighborhood-wide communication network. "They're coordinating," Vex'thul breathed. "Pack behavior. They're alerting the entire colony to our presence." Jake, meanwhile, was just trying to figure out why Mrs. Henderson's car alarm was going off again. He made a mental note to mention it to her, right after he figured out why his left knee was making that weird clicking sound. The aliens followed Jake's jogging route, staying carefully hidden behind trees and mailboxes. They documented everything: the way humans marked their territory with colored flags on small posts, the advanced hydration stations positioned at regular intervals, and the sophisticated waste management systems that seemed to be emptied by specialized vehicles. What they were actually observing were lawn decorations, garden hoses, and garbage cans. But when you're expecting to find a military installation, everything looks like military equipment. The real psychological warfare began when Jake got home and decided to prep for Taco Tuesday. Jake took his Mexican food seriously, which meant he had a kitchen full of appliances that most humans considered excessive and aliens considered terrifying. First came the food processor, which Jake used to make his own salsa. The sound it made while pulverizing tomatoes was like a miniature chainsaw having an argument with a blender. Through the kitchen window, the aliens watched Jake operate what appeared to be a sophisticated torture device. He's processing organic matter, Pip'squeek whispered, his voice tight with horror. Take notes, Vex'thul commanded. This could be how they process prisoners. Jake was making salsa verde. Really good salsa verde with just the right amount of cilantro and lime. He was quite proud of his recipe, which he'd perfected over several years of trial and error. He had no idea that his culinary skills were being interpreted as advanced interrogation techniques. The blender was next, turning innocent avocados into guacamole with the kind of violent efficiency that made the aliens question everything they thought they knew about human cuisine. The sound alone was enough to make Pip'squeek's antennae curl up in distress. But the real moment of terror came when Jake encountered his arch-nemesis, the can opener. This particular can opener was older than some small countries and had a personal vendetta against every can it encountered. Jake had to fight with it for 5 minutes just to open a can of black beans, making frustrated grunting noises and occasionally swearing at kitchen equipment. To the aliens, this looked like a human warrior engaged in ritual combat with a mechanical opponent. The fact that Jake eventually won only reinforced their growing suspicion that humans were not to be underestimated. Sir, Pip'squeek's voice was barely audible. I think we need to reconsider our approach. Vex'thul nodded grimly. Agreed. These humans are clearly more dangerous than we initially assessed. They had no idea that the most dangerous thing about Jake was his tendency to leave dirty dishes in the sink for 3 days running. The moment of truth arrived when Mrs. Kowalski decided she'd had enough of whatever was happening in her neighborhood. Armed with her walker, a spray bottle filled with water, and 78 years of accumulated irritation, she launched her own investigation into the suspicious activity in her backyard. Mrs. Kowalski had survived the Great Depression, 2 marriages, and 3 decades of neighborhood watch meetings. She was not about to be intimidated by what looked like teenagers in elaborate costumes playing pranks on her petunias. I see you there, you little troublemakers, she called out, brandishing her spray bottle like a weapon. Come out where I can see you. Vex'thul, who had faced down space pirates and interdimensional monsters without flinching, found himself genuinely terrified of a human female who barely came up to his shoulder. There was something about the way she wielded that spray bottle that suggested she knew how to use it. Sir, Pip'squeek whispered. I think that's their war chief. Impossible, Vex'thul replied, but his voice lacked conviction. According to our intelligence, humans select their leaders based on physical dominance. Mrs. Kowalski heard whispers and decided she'd had enough of being polite. She began spraying in the general direction of the garden shed, her aim surprisingly accurate for someone who claimed she couldn't see well enough to drive anymore. I know you're back there, Harold Chen. If you're installing another fountain without proper permits, I'm calling the Homeowners Association. The aliens, who had no idea who Harold Chen was or what a Homeowners Association might be, interpreted this as a threat to call in reinforcements. The spray bottle, meanwhile, was clearly some kind of chemical weapon. Retreat, Vex'thul ordered. Fall back to the primary target zone. They escaped by diving through Jake's back door, which wasn't locked because Jake had never met a security precaution he couldn't ignore. This led them directly into Jake's garage, where they encountered the source of the mysterious signals that had brought them to Earth in the first place. Jake was in his natural habitat, surrounded by speakers, mixing boards, and enough cables to supply a small recording studio. He was wearing his favorite DJ shirt, which read World's Okayest DJ in faded letters, and boxers that had cartoon tacos on them. He was also eating cereal directly from the box while trying to untangle a particularly stubborn audio cable. Oh, hey, Jake said, looking up from his breakfast. Are you guys here about the noise complaints? Because I've been keeping it down to reasonable levels, I swear. There was a moment of perfect silence as two species stared at each other across the vast gulf of mutual incomprehension. Vex'thul, who had prepared for this moment with 17 different first contact protocols, found himself completely at a loss. The human wasn't displaying any of the expected behaviors. No territorial posturing, no aggressive stance, no attempt to establish dominance. Just a vaguely confused guy holding a box of Lucky Charms. "We are here to assess your territorial claims," Vex'thul finally managed, falling back on the most basic diplomatic framework he knew. "My what now?" Jake asked, still chewing cereal. "Look, if this is about the music, I already talked to the city about it. I've got permits for everything, and I only play during legal hours. Well, mostly legal hours." Pip'squeek, consulting his field manual, leaned over to whisper to his commander. "Sir, this appears to be dominance display behavior. He's claiming legal authority over the territory." "Legal authority?" Vex'thul's mandibles clicked nervously. "What kind of legal authority?" "Permits, sir. He says he has permits." Jake, who had no idea he was being analyzed by xenobiologists, decided to be helpful. "You want to see my setup? It's pretty sweet. I just got this new subwoofer that can probably be heard from space." He wasn't wrong about that last part. "This is my pride and joy," Jake continued, walking over to his sound system. "Custom-built, professionally calibrated, and guaranteed to make your neighbors hate you. Watch this." Jake pressed a button, and the universe changed. The bass drop that followed wasn't just sound, it was a force of nature. It started somewhere around Jake's ankles and worked its way up through his entire body, shaking his bones and rattling his teeth. The garage door vibrated like a tuning fork. The windows buzzed in their frames, and somewhere in the distance, a car alarm joined the symphony. To the aliens, it was like being hit by a sonic weapon designed by a sadistic god. Their sensitive hearing, which could detect a whisper from across a battlefield, was overwhelmed by frequencies that seemed to bypass their ears entirely and attack their nervous systems directly. Vex'thul's combat armor registered the sound as a Class 7 sonic attack. His shields flickered and died. His weapons systems went offline. His communication array started broadcasting static. Pip'squeek, who had been taking notes on his datapad, watched in horror as the screen cracked and went dark. Then his antennae began to vibrate in harmony with the bass line, and he realized with growing terror that he was being weaponized by his own biology. "Stop," Vex'thul gasped, his voice barely audible over the sound. "Please stop." Jake, who was nodding his head to the beat, didn't hear the request. He was too busy appreciating the way the bass line made his coffee mug dance across the workbench. "Great sound quality, right?" Jake shouted over the music. "I spent 3 months calibrating this system. The frequency response is absolutely perfect." The frequency response was indeed perfect. Perfectly calibrated to reduce 2 of the galaxy's most feared hunters to quivering puddles of existential terror. When the song finally ended, the silence that followed was deafening. Vex'thul and Pip'squeek lay on the garage floor, staring at the ceiling and questioning every life choice that had led them to this moment. "So," Jake said, completely oblivious to the psychological damage he'd just inflicted, "you guys want some beer? I've got pizza rolls in the freezer." Vex'thul's call for backup was supposed to be a routine request for additional personnel. What he got instead was General Clixton, 3 battlecruisers, and a full invasion force that had been looking for an excuse to test their new planet-cracking weapons. "Commander," General Clixton's voice crackled through the comm system, "your reports are concerning. Class 7 sonic weapons? Autonomous patrol units? Coordinated psychological warfare? Sir, I believe we've stumbled upon a human military installation. The strategic implications are staggering." "Understood. We're deploying a full suppression force. Prepare for immediate extraction." What General Clixton didn't understand was that Vex'thul's military installation was actually a suburban neighborhood, where the most dangerous thing was usually Mrs. Patterson's driving. The alien fleet descended from orbit like avenging angels, their weapons charged and their shields raised. They had faced down rebellious star systems and emerged victorious. They had conquered planets and enslaved entire species. They were not going to be defeated by a backwater colony of primitive bipeds. They were about to learn that the universe has a sense of humor, and it's usually terrible. The first sign of trouble came when Jake decided this was the perfect time to host his weekly beats and barbecue party. Jake's parties were legendary in the neighborhood, mostly because they were the only social events that regularly prompted noise complaints from 3 different zip codes. "Hey everyone," Jake announced on his social media, "epic beats and barbecue at my place tonight. Buy up and bring your own speakers if you've got them. Let's make this one loud enough to wake the dead." The aliens, monitoring human communications, interpreted this as a call to arms. Bring your own speakers was clearly code for bring your own weapons. The reference to waking the dead was obviously some kind of resurrection protocol. "Sir," Pip'squeek reported, his voice tight with panic, "they're mobilizing the entire colony. And sir, they're bringing weapons." General Clixton's response was swift and decisive. "All ships, prepare for immediate planetary bombardment. We're not taking any chances." Unfortunately for the aliens, Jake's friends were already arriving. Tommy brought his car stereo, which he'd removed from his Honda Civic and hooked up to a car battery. Maria showed up with her Bluetooth speaker, which was small but surprisingly powerful. And Jake's neighbor Dave, who nobody really liked but who always brought good beer, arrived with a sound system that he'd borrowed from his cousin's band. The aliens watched in growing horror as humans began setting up what appeared to be a massive weapons array in Jake's backyard. Every few minutes, another vehicle would arrive, and more humans would emerge carrying mysterious electronic devices. "They're establishing a defensive perimeter," Vex'thul reported. "Multiple weapon emplacements, coordinated positioning. Sir, I think they know we're here." The humans knew nothing. They were just trying to figure out where to put the coolers and whether Jake's electrical system could handle running 6 different sound systems simultaneously. The answer to that question was no, but Jake had never let electrical capacity issues stop him before. He'd just run extension cords from every outlet in the house and hope for the best. The real chaos began when the ice cream truck arrived. Jake had specifically requested the ice cream truck because he thought it would be funny to have Mr. Softy providing snacks at a rave. What he hadn't considered was that the ice cream truck's cheerful melody, when played at high volume through a sound system designed for nightclubs, became a weapon of mass psychological destruction. Turkey in the Straw, played at 120 decibels, was like being trapped inside a music box designed by a sadistic children's entertainer. The melody was simple, repetitive, and absolutely inescapable. It burrowed into your brain like a particularly persistent earworm and refused to leave. The aliens, who had been monitoring the situation from orbit, watched their sensor readings go haywire as every piece of electronic equipment in the neighborhood began vibrating in harmony with the ice cream truck's melody. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're getting interference on all frequencies. It's like nothing I've ever seen." "What kind of interference?" "Musical, sir. It's Turkey in the Straw." General Clixton, who had conquered 17 star systems and had never retreated from a battle, felt his resolve beginning to crack. There was something about that melody that bypassed all rational thought and attacked the very core of his being. But the real moment of truth came when Jake's friends began setting up their sound systems. What had started as a simple backyard party was rapidly becoming an acoustic arms race, with each new arrival trying to outdo the previous setup. The synchronization was accidental. Jake's mixing board, which had been acting up for months, suddenly decided to work perfectly. Every speaker in the backyard locked onto the same frequency, creating a wall of sound that could be heard from orbit. The bass drop that followed was the kind of sound that planets make when they're being born. It started deep in the earth and worked its way up through the foundations of every house in the neighborhood, rattling windows, setting off car alarms, and causing at least 3 seismographs to register what appeared to be a minor earthquake. To the aliens, it was the sound of their worst nightmares coming true. Their shields failed. Their weapon systems went offline. Their communication arrays began broadcasting nothing but static and the distant echo of Turkey in the Straw. Retreat, General Clixton ordered, his voice barely audible over the cosmic-level baseline. All ships, immediate retreat. We're pulling back to the edge of the system. Sir, what about the ground team? They're on their own. May whatever gods they pray to have mercy on their souls. The Zephyrian Empire's tactical withdrawal from Earth was the fastest retreat in galactic military history. 3 battlecruisers, equipped with enough firepower to level a small moon, fled from a suburban neighborhood like they were being chased by the devil himself. Which, from their perspective, they were. Jake's party, meanwhile, was just getting started. The base drop that had sent an alien invasion force running for the hills was, according to Jake's Instagram post, absolutely epic and definitely going in the highlight reel. The fact that it had also prevented humanity's first alien contact was a detail that Jake would never know, and probably wouldn't have believed if someone had told him. Dude, Tommy shouted over the music, your sound system is insane. I think I can feel my organs rearranging themselves. Right? Jake replied, grinning as he adjusted the equalizer. I spent like 3 months getting the frequency response just right. The bass response is absolutely perfect. The bass response was indeed perfect. Perfect enough to reduce an advanced alien civilization to a species-wide case of PTSD. Vex'thul and Pip'squeek, abandoned by their own command structure, had taken refuge in Mrs. Kowalski's garden shed. They were currently huddled behind a bag of fertilizer, trying to make sense of what they'd just experienced. Sir, Pip'squeek whispered, his voice shaking, I think I need to revise my assessment of human military capabilities. Noted, Vex'thul replied, staring at his shattered equipment. When we get back to the ship, I want you to write a full report. Classification level, existential threat. What should I put down for recommended response? Run. Run very fast and don't look back. The aliens eventually managed to escape during the party's climax, when Jake's sound system synchronized with the ice cream truck's melody to create what partygoers later described as the most beautiful noise I've ever heard, and what alien survivors would remember as the song that ended worlds. Their return to Zephyrian space was met with skepticism, then disbelief, then growing horror as the implications became clear. Vex'thul's report, which read like a horror novel, written by someone with a serious case of survivor's guilt, was immediately classified and distributed to every military commander in the galaxy. Species classification, Homo sapiens, the report began. Threat level, apocalyptic. Recommended response, immediate quarantine of entire solar system. Do not approach under any circumstances. The report went on to describe humans as apex predators who have weaponized their entire environment and a species so dangerous that they don't appear to understand their own capabilities. It included detailed analysis of human defense systems, from autonomous patrol units to coordinated sonic weapons to psychological warfare techniques that could break trained soldiers in minutes. What it actually described were sprinkler systems, vacuum cleaners, and really loud music. But when you're expecting to find a military installation, everything looks like a weapon. The Galactic Council's response was swift and decisive. Earth was immediately reclassified as a protected terror zone and added to the list of planets that were absolutely, under no circumstances, is to be approached by any civilized species. Warning beacons were placed throughout the solar system, broadcasting a simple message in 17 galactic languages: danger. Apex predators. Approach at your own risk. The effect on galactic civilization was immediate and profound. Trade routes were rerouted to avoid the Sol system. Tourist agencies added Earth to their definitely don't go here lists. Several species developed new phobias based entirely on second-hand accounts of human capabilities. The Vex'thul Empire, which had been planning its own invasion of Earth, immediately canceled the operation and invested in better entertainment systems instead. The Centauri Collective began distributing pamphlets about the dangers of investigating primitive civilizations. And the Andromeda Federation started a whole new field of study dedicated to understanding how a species could be so dangerous that they didn't even know they were dangerous. Meanwhile, Jake was dealing with more immediate concerns. The city had issued him a noise violation. His neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was threatening to call the Homeowners Association. and his sound system had apparently blown a fuse during the party's climax. "I swear this never happened before," he told the police officer who had responded to the noise complaint. "Well, okay, it happened once before, but that was a completely different situation. Sir, we received reports of seismic activity. People thought there was an earthquake." That's probably the subwoofer. It's got really good bass response." The police officer, who had been dealing with noise complaints for 15 years, just shook his head and handed Jake a citation. "Keep it down next time, okay? Some of us have neighbors." Jake nodded and accepted the ticket, completely unaware that he'd just prevented an alien invasion with nothing more than good sound engineering and questionable musical taste. As the weeks passed, life in the neighborhood returned to normal. Mrs. Kowalski stopped complaining about strange noises in her backyard. Buster went back to his regular routine of chasing squirrels and barking at the mailman. And Jake began planning his next party. But across the galaxy, the story of the human military installation had taken on a life of its own. Alien species began sharing increasingly ridiculous warnings about humanity. They've domesticated carnivorous pack hunters as companions. They consume toxins for pleasure and call it coffee. They've trained mobile plants to guard their territories. The final entry in Jake's story came 6 months later, when he received a 5-star review on his DJ booking website from someone with the username definitely_not_alien_123. "Amazing performance," the review read. "Absolutely devastating sound quality. Would recommend to anyone looking to make a lasting impression. We'll never forget this experience. Please continue doing exactly what you're doing." Jake grinned and added the review to his promotional materials. He still had no idea that his playlist had been officially classified as a weapon of mass destruction by the Galactic Council, or that his subwoofer had single-handedly prevented humanity's first alien contact. He was just happy to get a good review. And really, when you think about it, that's the most human response of all. Somewhere in the galaxy, alien civilizations continued to watch Earth from a very safe distance, convinced that humanity was playing the longest, most elaborate game of psychological warfare in galactic history. They had no idea that humans were just being human, which was apparently terrifying enough. And in a small suburban neighborhood on a small blue planet, Jake Morrison continued to make music, completely unaware that he was single-handedly maintaining galactic peace through the power of really, really loud bass drops. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. It was just usually at humanity's expense. 5 years later, Jake's story had become legend in both worlds, though for completely different reasons. On Earth, Jake had become something of a local celebrity. His parties were the stuff of neighborhood legend, and his sound system had been featured in 3 different audio engineering magazines. He'd even started a YouTube channel called Bass Drops and Backyard Beats that had garnered a modest following among fellow audio enthusiasts. The secret, he explained to his viewers in episode 47, is understanding that bass isn't just about volume. It's about resonance, frequency response, and creating an experience that your audience will literally feel in their bones. If only he knew how literally his audience had felt it. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the legend of the Earth Defense Installation had grown to mythic proportions. The Galactic Council had established an entire department dedicated to monitoring human activities, convinced that such a dangerous species must be carefully watched. Commander Vex'thul of the Betelgeuse Defense Force had built his entire career on studying the human threat. His classified briefings had become required reading at military academies across 17 star systems. Note the psychological sophistication, he would tell his students, displaying a grainy photograph of Jake's backyard. The humans have disguised their most devastating weapon as a recreational gathering. They call it a party. This level of strategic deception is unprecedented in galactic warfare. The students would nod gravely, taking careful notes about the terrifying implications of human party warfare. Dr. Quintessence, the galaxy's leading expert on xenopsychology, had written an entire book about humanity titled The Unconscious Weapon, How Evolution Created the Perfect Predator. It was currently a bestseller on 14 different worlds. The most fascinating aspect, she wrote in Chapter 12, is that humans appear to be completely unaware of their own capabilities. This suggests either incredible psychological discipline or a level of evolutionary adaptation that borders on the supernatural. The book's appendix included a detailed analysis of human pack bonding behaviors, which was really just a description of Jake's party playlist and the crowd's enthusiastic response to it. But perhaps the most telling sign of Jake's inadvertent impact on galactic civilization was the memorial that had been erected on Zephyria Prime. It was a simple black stone with an inscription in the ancient Zephyrian script, in memory of those who dared to listen to the music of the void. May their sacrifice never be forgotten. Vex'thul visited the memorial every year on the anniversary of what Zephyrians now called the day the music died. He would stand there for exactly 11 minutes, the length of time his unit had been exposed to Jake's sound system, place a small offering of silence berries at the base of the stone, and remember his fallen comrades. Pip'squeek had been honorably discharged from the military and now worked as a civilian contractor for the Galactic Council's Human Monitoring Division. His job was to analyze human audio transmissions for signs of weapons development. He spent his days listening to Earth's radio broadcasts, carefully cataloging every new song as a potential threat to galactic security. His latest report, classified at the highest levels, contained a dire warning about something called death metal and its potential applications in psychological warfare. The report was titled The Screaming Void, an analysis of human sonic torture techniques, and had caused 3 different species to immediately upgrade their defense systems. What he was actually describing was a Metallica album, but context, as always, was everything. Back on Earth, Jake was completely oblivious to his status as the galaxy's most feared DJ. He had just finished installing new speakers in his backyard and was testing the sound levels when his phone buzzed with a text from his friend Mike. "Dude. No, you're never going to believe this. I just got a weird 5-star review on my wedding DJ website. Someone called totally_a_human_person said they heard about my work from a friend and that I come highly recommended for special occasions involving large groups and the need for memorable experiences. Super weird, right?" Jake laughed and typed back, "Probably just someone who was at one of my parties. Word gets around about good sound systems." If Jake had known that totally_a_human_person was actually the username of a Regelian intelligence operative who had been tasked with identifying other human sonic weapons specialists, he might have been a little more concerned. But ignorance, in this case, was bliss. The truth was that Jake Morrison, suburbanite audio enthusiast and accidental savior of humanity, had achieved something that no military strategist, diplomat, or peace negotiator had ever managed. He had created a perfect deterrent to alien invasion. Not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but through the simple act of throwing a really good party with really loud music in his backyard on a Tuesday night. And so, as the galaxy watched from a safe distance and Jake continued to perfect his sound system, the universe maintained its delicate balance. Humanity remained blissfully unaware that they were feared throughout the galaxy. Aliens remained convinced that humans were the most dangerous species in the universe, and Jake Morrison remained completely focused on achieving the perfect bass drop. It was, perhaps, the most human solution to interstellar diplomacy ever conceived, but accidentally terrifying everyone so thoroughly that they left you alone to live your life in peace. And in a universe full of complex political alliances, ancient grudges, and species-ending weapons, sometimes the best defense was just being yourself, especially if yourself happened to be a guy with a really good sound system and absolutely no idea how intimidating that could be. The stars continued to shine, the galaxy continued to spin, and Jake Morrison continued to make music that could, quite literally, be heard across the cosmos. He still had no idea that his hobby had saved the world. And really, that was probably for the best.